Traveling or even just preparing for travel can be a daunting task. I remember the first trip I had after diagnosis, and I did not feel ready. And that's why today we are getting into all things travel, and I brought on the person who taught me everything about what it takes to travel with diabetes and who guided me through that first trip. Welcome to the show. I'm Justin. I have type 1 diabetes, and on here I talk all things diabetes tech, news, research, and management. I have been traveling the world for about 8 months now. I put all my stuff in storage in September, and what was supposed to be like a 2-month trip of just me kind of going place to place, I wound up meeting someone who was a digital nomad traveling with a bunch of digital nomads, and I tagged along. So I've been traveling for another 6 months after that. I went to Colombia, Brazil. I'm in Lisbon today. I'm going to Valencia tomorrow. Then I'm traveling a little bit on my own, coming back to the US for ADA and Friends for Life, which I'm so excited for. And then I'm going back out to traveling. I'm going to Albania, Turkey, Morocco, and maybe even further out in Africa. I haven't decided yet. But if my story tells you everything, it's that you can travel if you have diabetes. It is possible. I'm doing it, and I've learned so much. So I'm going to get into that today, as well as getting all of the information from today's interviewee, which is my diabetes educator, Mary Rose. She's taught me everything there is to know about diabetes management, and today her and I get into all things travel, from what you should pack and what you should talk to your care team about prior to travel, what to speak with your travel companions about, navigating airport security and airplanes, as well as how insulin therapy changes on vacations. There are also a few things we forgot to mention, which I'll mention at the end of the show. And there is a link in the show notes that's got the resources we bring up, from a letter your doctor can sign, a diabetes supplies checklist, and a bunch of accessories that I like. So you can find that in the show notes. Keep in mind that all of my content is not medical advice and is for educational purposes only. Always consult with a physician before making changes to your healthcare. All right, let's get into it. Thank you for coming on the show. It's always fun having you on. You've been part of my story since the beginning, and I've learned, so much of what I know today is because of you, and you were my number one cheerleader for doing this. So Diabetic may not be here without you.
Oh, wow. Well, it's a pleasure to know you, and you've come so far, and you're such a great example to everyone. So it's wonderful to see your progress and be part of it.
Well, the idea for this episode came from, I've been traveling. I've been a digital nomad for 7 months now, maybe 8 months. And so many new experiences have happened to me, whether it's, flying on all these different airlines and going on all these adventures and living in all these different places. And you played a pivotal role in the beginning of my story, my first trip. And I thought maybe having you on and walking me through how you speak to patients about travel, and maybe even me offering some of my thoughts, because I know a lot of people are afraid of traveling, a lot of people with diabetes. Why is that?
Well, it's because it's so uncertain, and some of the security in diabetes control is your regimen, you're knowing what you're going to do next, you're be able to predict the future and what you're going to eat and how you're going to exercise and who you're going to be with. So you're set outside of those parameters, and sometimes, it causes uncertainty and chaos. So it was nice when you were newly diagnosed that you went on your first trip, and we had a whole session on preparing you for that. You were uncertain whether you were going to go. It was in the middle of the pandemic. You're going with a bunch of wild friends that love to party, and so that it was so important to meet with me and for me to play a role in your planning and being there for you by email if you needed me. So everyone has their first trip, and I would highly recommend that they have somebody like me in their life that they can sort of move through that trip with.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I couldn't imagine diagnosis, or even still to today when I'm trying new devices, not having an educator to speak with, to ask questions, to help guide me, to look at my levels and my trends over the last however many months and understand that better, and tweak my treatment. Yeah, that trip you're talking about. So that was about 2 or 3 months into diagnosis. We had just gotten COVID vaccines. We were ready to go on a trip for my 30th birthday. I wasn't using any, like, the only technology I was using was a Dexcom G6 CGM and, like, dumb insulin pens. They didn't have smarts. They weren't smart insulin pens or anything. And yeah, this was my first ever trip after diagnosis. Something, going to Mexico, going in the pool, going to the beach, that was something that was so normal to me before. And then, like,
Right.
the idea of having to manage this disease in that setting, and also not fully understanding what the implications of a vacation were because I was so new. But you were like, no, there are some things that you need to think about in really all facets of the vacation. So I would say people shouldn't be afraid, is because vacation, it's just managing diabetes somewhere else. So in my opinion, as long as you are just as prepared as you are at home, you should be fine. Like the odds of needing a doctor here would really be, just as if anything can happen to anyone, diabetes or not, when you're traveling. But when it comes down to the diabetes, like, you're just have what you need. So before we get into packing, what would you say are the things people with diabetes should take care of to travel, besides packing?
So I think the first thing they should do is meet with their endocrinologist or their diabetes educator because they need to go through the prescriptions. So they have to have backup insulin, they have to have glucagon, they might need, if they're going to a foreign country where there's water that's not so clean, they might need some antibiotics or drugs that help them stop vomiting. Um, just things like that. They might need a travel letter. They may need to talk to their doctor about timing of insulin and changing the insulin. So we knew when you were going that you were going to dance and you were going to drink alcohol. So we reduced your insulin a little bit to prevent hypoglycemia. So the doctor might, or the nurse practitioner or the diabetes educator might adjust the insulin levels before they leave. Um, we may also talk about exercise. Are you going to a wedding and you're going to drink and dance all night and then go to sleep? We might want to adjust the long-acting insulin or the basal rate or put you on activity mode overnight to prevent nighttime hypoglycemia. So I would have a session with the doctor. Um, or the nurse educator or your dietitian who's a diabetes educator. And then I would, get the prescriptions all set up. You also may need to call your insurance company to see, what's the coverage for seeing, going to the hospital or getting medical care while you're away in a foreign country. Your doctor might have some tips about what hospitals are good in the area, just in case there was an emergency, or your doctor might have another doctor that they know in that area that they can give you a name of someone. So these are the things that I would start thinking about. And then, dealing with your pharmacist and maybe getting overrides for prescriptions. If you're going to be gone for a long trip, the insurance company will cover that with working with the pharmacist. So there's a lot, there's a lot of planning that goes into it.
Yeah, especially being on MDI at the time, multiple daily injections, getting that reduction in long acting insulin really was important. Whereas when you're on an insulin pump, you at least have a safety cushion. You could adjust things, and some systems allow you to have activity feature, or Loop lets you put on all these different overrides, which I use a lot, and we'll get into that. But on MDI, that was like a really helpful and necessary thing. You also mentioned to me that you could get like a letter from your doctor that affords you certain rights, or it's like something you can refer to on your travels. Like, what is that letter, and what could that help you with?
So your doctor can write that letter stating that you have type 1 diabetes, that you need to carry insulin syringes and needles, for your pump or pump supplies or infusion sets and snacks and drinks to maintain your blood sugars. So it would have your name and your date of birth on it, and then the doctor's signature, which would sort of allow you to bring snacks and supplies and not get a hassle at customs. It's usually for international travel, and most endocrinologists would have that letter as just a form letter and very easily be able to send it to you. So I would definitely advise if you're doing international travel to bring that. And then there's just that the whole supply list of like electrolytes and, those little drip drop things that you can put in water bottles just in case you can't bring fluids onto a flight, or, you know, just you need it because you're getting dehydrated. So there's just so much to think about. And I think, getting those things just in case, bringing the glucagon just in case, bringing extra everything, double of the supplies that you need. So I think these are important. And one other thing I think is that when you're thinking about exercise travel and diabetes, there's a lot of benefits. Like, look, you needed about 30% less insulin while you were traveling. I mean, and your blood sugars were really well controlled. So you drink alcohol, sometimes that lowers it. You exercise, sometimes that lowers it. You're not stressed anymore. You're having fun for a whole week. These are all things that are good for diabetes. So I think you came back from that trip, and got in even better control because you were able to relax and live your life and be with your friends and celebrate your birthday. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
and it definitely teaches you a lot about management and how connected levels are to activity and drinking and foods. So I think
absolutely.
every trip has taught me a lot about management. And also, the more trips I go on, the more I understand why I had a high or why I had a low, and I can adjust accordingly. So, whenever I'm going out on long treks or adventures, I'm just like very aware of, okay, I need some sort of override. I need my target to be higher ahead of time, and I need to know what's coming up ahead of time.
So it seems overwhelming, but the thing is that you have somebody that's going to do it with you. You don't have to remember everything that we're talking about on this. You go to your endocrinologist or your diabetes educator, and they help you come up with your plan, right? And it's not going to be perfect, but you're going to be fine, you know,
Yeah.
and you're going to be safe.
I wrote out some accessories that I like to travel with that I thought I'd bring up. One is the
Right.
Frio, which you told me about, which is like a pack that you just put in water. It can keep your insulin cool for 3 days, not refrigerator temp, but just like cool. And that's good for the beach. It's good for, going out and traveling for a full day and going in and out of different temperatures. Recently, I've been using Sugar Medical travel bags. They sell a ton of like accessories and low snacks and beyond, but they also have bags of all different sizes, and you can have that extra carry-on bag that is your medical supplies bag. So
Absolutely.
I have this Sugar Medical bag that if I wanted it to be that bag for me, it can be. And they even sell one that can like clip on to a suitcase, which is nice. I'll put links to all this in the show notes. The last thing on my list was adhesive patches for pumps and CGMs. Such a must. Yeah, you're going to places that are maybe more humid or hot than you're used to, or you're swimming a lot. And these I take with me on every vacation. And what else should they do when it comes to preparing? I know some people with tube pumps, they sometimes get like a backup pump.
So all the pump companies, even the patch pumps, they have controllers. And even if you're using your cell phone, bring a controller with you and put all your settings in just in case you lose your cell phone to manage your pump. So if you do have a controller, or you can get an extra controller. All the pump companies offer a travel, you know, um, backup pump. Okay, so that's something definitely to bring with you. I think really good socks and shoes that are comfortable, that aren't going to tear up your feet. And I've told you, you just talked about water sports, a medic ID that's on your body, okay, when you don't have a wallet or some other way to identify. I told you the story
I don't
about
wear one.
being well, I was on an airplane and a man had a seizure from a low blood sugar, and we could not find
Wow.
anything on his body. But somebody had a glucose meter, a nurse or somebody, and we
Wow.
tested the blood sugar, using a clean Lancet. And sure enough, he was low. He eventually woke up, and we were able to, give him some juice, but he had nothing identifying himself on his body. And that would have been, we're trained to look on the left wrist first and here for dog tag type of. So medic alert is a great one. I think it's really important. So I think that's just, expect the best, but prepare for the worst, and it's just something I would have when I'm traveling for sure.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that I do. One is my Apple Watch. I haven't been wearing it lately, but it does have like an emergency feature on it where you can like hold down on the buttons and it shows you what medications they're on, what illnesses they may have. So mine has that if I'm wearing it. And then also what I do is with anyone who's using a phone, you can take screenshots of your settings and save those online. So I put them on Google Drive. My DIY loop settings are on Google Drive. In case my phone is lost, I need to download the app again and I need to reprogram it, right? So I have those settings in the cloud. And then also I mostly do this also for work, but I bring an extra iPhone with me.
I love that. I love that you do that.
I think it's great, like, especially, I'm traveling abroad for 7 or 8 months now, and having an extra phone with me in case it gets stolen or I lose it, whatever. I don't have to end my trip. I don't have to go find a new phone, whatever. So that's been kind of nice. It's just an older iPhone that I had.
Yeah, so we also recommend that you keep a list of all the medications that you're on, and save them on your Google Drive, or I like even better, just making a hard copy and sticking it in your suitcase, just in case there's no Wi-Fi, you can't get to your drive, you can't get to your computers. Just having just a printed out version of your settings, a printed out version of your medication list, just in case you lose a pill and we don't know. You're like, oh, I lost the yellow pill with the X5 on it. We don't know what that is, right? So we need to know, exactly what you're taking. And another thing to check before you go is, pharmacies. Is there a pharmacy close? Is there a medical center close, to where you're staying? And just kind of know that information, and maybe even just know a few words in that language that you're whatever country
That's
you're
a
going
big
to,
one.
about like how do I get to an emergency? How do I call a doctor? How do I call an ambulance? In a few little terms there for emergencies. That's what I would do.
Azúcar, like sugar.
Yeah.
Like I
Right.
should make a list of like my go-to words, but like
I like that.
insulin,
Yeah.
sugar,
Sugar,
orange juice,
ambulance,
um,
hospital,
and
that
yeah,
emergency,
yeah.
yes, exactly. Ketone strips, just to see if you wake up in the morning and blood sugar's high, you can urinate on a ketone strip. If it's got moderate ketones, you haven't gotten your insulin all night. You're not even going to bother trying to get a bolus through that pump, right? You're just going to inject insulin, change it out, right? So these are little
Yeah.
things that you can have with you. Extra snacks, glucagon, lots of glucagon just in case. Carry glucagon with you. I love the Bexami. It's so easy. And I don't know, we're going to talk about travel partners and training them on how to use Bexami, how to notify you or recognize in you the hypoglycemia symptoms.
This episode is sponsored by Omnipod. As someone with T1D and with an incredibly active lifestyle, it's important for me not to get tied up, especially with tubes on my insulin pump. I love to go swimming, lift weights, and play kickball with friends. And with Omnipod 5, I never have to worry about tubes getting in the way. Plus, not having to disconnect helps me to stay in range during all of my favorite physical activities. That includes sexy time too. See if you're eligible for a 10-day trial by visiting omnipod.com/diabetic. On there, you'll see full safety and risk information and trial terms. That's omnipod.com/diabetic.
If you're traveling with companions, what should you make sure of? What should you communicate to them?
Yeah, so I think it's important to communicate to them the symptoms of low blood sugar. I think that's the most important safety thing when you're um, traveling. The biggest risk is going low because you are moving around more, you're drinking alcohol, you're not stressed. So the insulin that you took at home might be too much to be taking on vacation, right? So the symptoms, what are your particular symptoms? I get like this, I act like this. You might see me sweating or shaking, or my words aren't coming out properly, slurring my speech a little bit, that kind of stuff. And if you see that, this is where you can check my blood sugars, or, I could lose consciousness. This is where my glucagon is. This is how to use it. Teach them how to look at your blood sugars on your phone, what your phone code is, just in case you don't have them on share. Putting them on share, it's really easy to do, and it's a pleasure to have them on it. And you don't have to share all your glucose levels with them. You can just share whatever you want, lows or highs, or that kind of thing. So I would say for travel partners, just put them on, the low alerts only.
Yeah.
The high stuff is you mostly, and troubleshooting pump failure, or giving an extra bolus if you need it, or carb counting. That's kind of stuff that you're going to navigate as an adult. Maybe children might need help with their parents troubleshooting pump failure, but pump failure is the other big risk when you're traveling, because water sports, things like that, you get pulled out. Maybe you're going for a golf trip or a tennis trip, playing a sport, might pull out or sweat off.
Yeah, and another thing when it comes to communicating with others, I think one thing I try to communicate is like spontaneity and the speed of which I can do things. So, yeah,
Yes.
I can do whatever I want, but unfortunately, it's not a good decision for me to just hop on a bike all of a sudden and go, from one side of town to the other. Or if we're running late for a reservation, to run to the reservation, because what if there's 2 units of insulin on board and I'm already kind of going low? I can't run or walk or bike faster because then I'll go low, and that's not fair to myself. So I think trying to communicate with people, if you're all in a rush to get to dinner, let them know, hey, listen, I'm going to have a low if I run with you. You can either run up there and get there first and I'll be behind you, or you can slow down with me. But like, it's not in
Wonderful.
my control. And I know a
Right.
lot of people struggle with that insecurity of slowing people down, of not being able to keep up with everyone. But it's just so not fair to yourself to put yourself in a low just to, make the dinner reservations. Someone else can go make it. So I think like just communicating that and explaining to people that, yeah, like it's not in my control. I'm not the drama. This is like an illness I deal with, and it's something, I need to take care of. So that's super important to me.
Another thing is, if I tell you that I feel like I'm going low and I need a juice, can I ask you, and would you get it for me quickly? Or if I start to have a low and I'm treating it, would you just stay with me, and just to make sure I'm okay? Because there is a chance that I could, not out, and I need you to keep me awake. So just asking for what you need, asking for that companionship and that support.
It's really special when those people step up and they want,
Oh,
like
they want
oftentimes
to.
they want to. People want to be there for you. They understand, and I've had a fair amount of these situations happen in my travel so far. I'm traveling with a group of around 20 people from country to country that I just like stumbled on and have become close to, but they've already seen me in moments on a hike or at the beach, whatever it is, having a bit of a low. And I didn't always have enough low snacks, which was on me. And I brought more than I thought I needed, and they had some. And they didn't even, it was no question, they like gave it to me and I didn't even ask. But I felt uncomfortable about it, and I'm trying to be better about not having to rely on others in those situations. But just sometimes those things just come up out of nowhere. Yeah, it just happens.
It happens.
You can't be perfect all the
So
time. So
talk to me about your low snacks. What are your favorite low snacks when you're hiking and things like that? Do you use the glucose gel? I love that because it's so fast, and it just, you can give out a box to a bunch of people and have them put it in their bag. They're not going to snack on it. It's
yeah, you're not going to snack on glucose gels because they're
no,
not
no, because they're
that
gross.
great of tasting. But they're good when you're low. You're like, oh, give it to me. Um, so glucose gels, I love. I haven't been getting them recently, but they are one of my favorites. They're fast acting. Um, Then there's a new gummy that everyone's talking about. And I mean, I love it myself. It's called Glow Gummies. And they come in like big jars or reusable packs that you can, keep filling. So those are amazing. I'll have to send you those too, because I think that you'd be interested in sending those to people. And then fruit snacks and any type of gummies that I find. So what I do is I try to take whatever low snacks I have at home and pack those in my luggage for the trip. I don't like having to buy low snacks when I'm out and about or on vacation.
Sure. No, bring them with you.
I call it the diabetes tax, because like all of a sudden you're having a low and you have to pay for something that you don't want to pay. Like you don't want a low snack, you have to have it. So I take all these low snacks, and then when I get to my place on vacation, I take them all and I put them in a bowl, and I have my low snack corner of the room. So whenever I'm going out, whenever I'm having a low in the house, whatever it is, I can easily grab them. And it's important for me to have that space for that, because then I can be on top of it.
Yes.
So
And I
that's
would
like
also
my
say,
go-to.
I would also add to that, if you have a backpack or a purse or a coat, just stick them in there in advance. When you get to the place, just stick in your glucose gels in there or your glucose tabs in there, just because you could run out and forget to grab from your hotel stash. Um, it's just it's a lot, right? But
It's a lot.
yeah, I have another patient that uses honey. She had found these little packets of honey that look a little bit like the glucose gels. I think they're a little lower. You might need two of them, but those are nice too, and you can swish them around your mouth and then swallow. The gummies are fine, but you do need to chew and swallow them. Same with glucose tablets, so they do take a little bit longer to get into your body. And I would also add to patients, just let them go into the stomach and get absorbed for 15 to 20 minutes before you add a bunch of other food, because it's going to compete with absorption and it's going to slow it down. Also,
Gotcha.
looking at your Dexcom for that 20 minutes, really not worth it, because it could be lagging behind and sort of set you off to, um, overtreat all your lows. So,
Yeah, I try to be as intentional as possible. Sometimes it's hard to be
yeah.
intentional because you're so low, but I try to, keep counting the carbs I'm eating, know what my blood sugar was, how much insulin was on board, and kind of do that math and be like, well, there's no way I'm going to be low after this. Like, this is good. And just like, turn it off.
Do you use a glucose meter after you treat a low, or do you just kind of wait?
Not really.
Do you
No,
bring
it's funny. Yeah,
are you bringing a
well,
glucose meter
yes.
with you? Okay,
Oh,
good.
you need to bring a glucose meter. Yeah, everywhere.
Yeah, but
Well,
that's a good
there's,
time
yes.
to test with a meter, is 15, 20 minutes after you treat a low. You'll really see what the real glucose is from what you gave. On Dexcom, it's just going to be behind a bit.
Today's episode is sponsored by T1D Exchange. You can directly make an impact on diabetes healthcare, treatments, and technology by participating in the T1D Exchange registry. It starts with a simple survey about your life with T1D, and it only takes about 15 minutes. After that, you'll have a personal portal with ongoing T1D study and survey opportunities. Plus, some of these studies even offer compensation. Signing up with the link in the show notes helps support my channel, and it allows me to continue putting out free content. You can sign up at t1dexchange.org/diabetic or click that link in today's show notes.
I always get questions about like all facets of the airport experience. Let's start with security. I go through the metal detectors and all the machines with my pumps and CGMs. I only in the beginning did I not, and then I like just started doing it, and I've never had an issue. I've worn Omnipod, I've worn Dexcom, I've worn the Tandem Mobi, and I don't know, I
And you
do
go
it.
right through it. You go right through it, huh? Yeah, a
I
lot of
do.
people do. A lot of people do. I have to say, do what the manufacturer says. I'm not allowed to tell you what to do, but
Yeah.
yeah, you just got to do what's best for you. And if you want to just get a pat down and you just tell them, hey, I'm wearing diabetes equipment. Here's my travel letter. Here's my supply box. I don't want to put it through the ringer there. So they have to let you do a pat down, and they're really usually pretty cool about it.
And sometimes what I'll do is if I go through the body scanner, I will go through it. And then when I finish, I'll say to them, I'll be like, I'm wearing an insulin pump and a CGM. And,
Oh, you say
sometimes
afterwards.
they're like, yeah, I tell them like, just to like,
Oh,
I
right,
kind of
because
get
you know
ahead
they
of it.
saw
It's just,
something. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it depends on the situation, but
Okay, good. I'm
sometimes I
glad.
like to just voice it. And then also another thing, I guess, perk that I like to take advantage of, depending on the situation, is the ability to board first early
Oh,
when
yeah,
they say they're boarding people with,
absolutely.
who are slower, disabilities, children, whatever it may be. I do take advantage of that sometimes. I take advantage of it when I have my carry-on and it has a bunch of supplies that I need to make sure that gets in an overhead compartment. And I do not want this to get checked. I do not want to lose my medication. So that's something I do. And sometimes what I do, because there is this discomfort that comes from like being part of that first group of people, because you're like, people will look at you and be like, well, what's wrong with them? And there's just a feeling you get. Sometimes what I'll do is when they're checking in, when they're boarding like first class, I'll go
Right.
in that line and I'll just say to them when I get to them, be like, oh, I have diabetes, or I'm boarding early for my
Yeah, you
disability,
do
whatever
not
it
have to
is.
say, they're
Yeah,
not
I
allowed to
don't say
ask you, and you do
diabetes.
not have to say what's wrong with you. You just get on. Yeah, you just stand in line and
Yeah,
get on there. Yeah.
I don't mention diabetes. I just
I
say like
I
I
I
need to
think it's
board
a great
early.
idea, especially after seeing what happened that one time. When you had the low when you were on board. So it's a good idea. Get on there, get settled, get your supplies in the airplane, and get a seat that's comfortable, and it reduces stress. I mean, it's a lot of stress just thinking and getting on and waiting and
What you mentioned was I had put out this video of this really bad low I had on a plane. I was in a middle seat and I was just panicking because I had like no low snacks left. And I like felt like I couldn't move. I really felt like I was having a panic attack. All the paranoia was setting in. I had no low snacks left. I ate all of them, was still dropping, freaking out inside, felt so alone. And then I was like, you know what? I am going to press the flight attendant button. I'm going to ask them to get me orange juice. Like, that is what I need to do right now. So I do that. And the flight attendant comes over, gets me orange juice, gives it to me. And I was going to be fine. I knew from the size of the cup they gave me, I was like, okay, I'll be good. So I think what I learned from that experience is the flight attendants want to help you, you know?
They do. And they can help you if you get on the plane sooner and there's not a bunch of people on there and you're having a low. It's easier to get them and get their attention. So I would say if you can board early, go for it. Yeah. This is another thing before you even get to the airport. As soon as you open your eyes, when you wake up the day you know you're going to travel, you put on your activity mode. So you reduce the amount of insulin that's going into your body from the moment you wake up that morning that you're going to travel, to reduce the amount of insulin that's in your body while you're in the airport and getting on the plane and getting to your destination. I say run your blood sugars a little bit higher than what you normally run them at, because it's a travel day and you don't want to ruin the day. You don't want to be in an airport alone or in a foreign country alone and having a low. So running your blood sugars a little bit higher while you're traveling is a really good idea.
I feel like though, like one of the situations I'm often in when I'm traveling is because I'm so stagnant. I like sometimes will get stuck high. So I guess I would be afraid to run my levels higher. And I don't have issues running them as they normally are, but like just that, like sitting down for 6 hours, maybe 10 hours, I find that if I ate something on the plane, I'll get stuck.
Well, you can always turn it off once you get on the plane and your blood sugar's high. But getting there safely is more important than having
Yeah.
perfect blood sugar day, right? And most of the activity modes on the FDA approved pumps run at a 150 target, so it's still within target range. It just might be 20 to 30% higher than what you normally um, keep your blood sugars.
Yeah, I do like to take advantage of those settings.
You need to stay in the middle road, the middle part of your target or the higher to middle part of your target, just to keep you safe from lows. But you also need to be safe from highs as far as pump failures and things like that. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a hospital. So, you just got to choose the middle road when you're traveling,
What else should people know about when they're on the plane when it comes to their pumps or their insulin pens? I get a lot of questions about like, am I going to be okay using these devices?
Yeah, there's been a little controversy as to disconnecting and reconnecting. You and I were kind of looking it up before we came here, and I think what we came to was with the tubed pumps to just disconnect as they're going up might be a safe way, but that the most of the pumps are very safe. There's no problems. I would check with the manufacturer of your pump to see if there's any special disconnecting or pausing that you need to do with your pump on takeoff or going down. But to me, it's just very safe. I've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of patients that travel every day and don't do anything when they're with their pump when they're traveling airplanes.
I
So
do nothing. I do
so,
nothing.
this is a big part of being a responsible pumper is to troubleshoot and use your company's resources. They have diabetes educators, they have policies and procedures, they have backup pumps you can take with you to travel. So I would say rely on them and ask them what's going on with their system and traveling.
And what about with insulin pens? There were a few things that you told me people should be aware of.
A few times I've seen that the pressure inside the insulin pen gets a little messed up. And so what I would do with the pen when you get out and you're going to use it for the first time is just put first of all, don't travel with the needle on it. Okay. Because that can affect the pressure and air bubbles getting into the system. And then when you land and you're about to give your first injection, put a new needle on and do a prime and make sure you see insulin come out of the needle. If you don't, do another prime and another prime until you actually see some insulin come out of the needle before you use your prime.
All right. So now we've gotten to our vacation, and, when you're on that vacation, lots of things are happening that you're not used to. How should people adjust for, say, like the food they're eating in these new places that they've never eaten before?
Yeah, so that depends on the activity. First of all, they need to talk to their doctor about that. Okay, so before you leave, sometimes your doctor will adjust your insulin to carb ratios if it's going to be a more active meal. I would say for carb counting is where you're going to have your difficulty because you're going to be eating things that are not within your scope, right? So I would say have an app like MyFitnessPal or Figwe or Snack or any of these really great diabetes apps. Use Google, use Siri, just ask, how many carbs are in a cup of pasta, so that you can get as close to the right carb count as possible. And then talk to your healthcare provider about adjusting your carb ratio if you think you're going to be more active during travel.
Yeah. You and I actually did an episode a while back on carb counting and like the different apps that we like to use. So people should listen to that if they want to know more about those apps. And then I have another video that's like my favorite carb counting apps. So I'll put links to both of those videos in the show notes so people can download them. Figwe was one of my favorites. It really helped me understand different types of foods, even if you were somewhere new. It has a sliding scale. And even just like Siri or Google, being able to ask those questions is helpful.
Yeah. And Figwe is really nice for visual estimating. And then I also say to people, if you're going to Italy and you don't usually eat pasta, make pasta at home. Measure out your cooked pasta so you can see how many cups of pasta you actually eat. Some people eat 2 cups, some people eat 3 cups, and then look at what that pasta looks like on the plate so you can be better at visually counting when you get to Italy. Okay. But don't skip eating pasta in Italy because you have diabetes. You need to live. So let's practice at home and get it right. 1 cup of cooked pasta is 45 grams, guys. This is why people don't do well with pasta. They always undercount it.
I've gotten much better at pasta and rice and
Yes.
being able to eye it. I definitely underestimated it all the time. And now I'm
Yes.
like, no, that's a lot of carbs.
A lot of carbs. You got to put a lot of carbs in there. And that's how you do it. That's how you get to enjoy it. One other thing I want to go back to with the airplane is making sure that all your supplies are on the airplane with you, that you do not put them under the plane. There could be freezing temperatures under the plane that will completely damage your insulin. And then it might not even get to the bottom of the plane. It might get on another plane. And your insulin and supplies could end up in Africa when you're in Italy, right? So you don't want to be waiting on your insulin when you're in another country. That bag may never show up. So definitely. And I tell people, actually split up your supplies. Put half of your supplies in your travel partner's carry-on and half of it in your carry-on. Yeah.
Yeah, what I tend to do is for insulin, I bring that all on the plane with me. And then if it comes to like pods and CGMs, I'll bring as many as I can that would last me like 2 weeks, let's say, with me on the plane. And if I have backups, especially since I'm traveling so much, I need a lot of backups. I will check those. But as long as I know, like, I'll be okay for 2 weeks, or, at least, like, that gives you the time to be like, all right, where's my luggage? Like, I need this right away, or I need to figure this out, whatever it is. I may need to go to a pharmacy here, which, speaking of pharmacies while abroad, it is possible to get medication abroad. It depends where you are. And it's going to be different everywhere. But I'm here in Lisbon, and I went to a pharmacy and asked them about prices. First of all, the prices are way less. A vial of insulin's 40 euros. And they said, they were like, oh yeah, if you have a US prescription, we can give it to you. And some places may not even require that.
Yeah.
But I was like, whoa, if I didn't bring my insulin, or if it got lost, I could just get my doctor to send me a prescription and use it here.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
that's a good thing
good to know that
know.
that's an option.
Yeah, that's a good thing to know before you go on your travel visit to your doctor. You could get written prescriptions to take with you and the travel letter to take with you. Oh, another thing I would mention to take with you is Neosporin. And put it on when you finish your pump site and you take it off. Just rub a little bit on while you're on vacation before you go to bed, because you're swimming, you're wearing wet bathing suits, and you're sweating, and you're out in the jungle hiking. Your risk of getting a site infection is a little higher also when you're traveling. So it just could be a nice little preventative thing to do on your pump sites when you take them off. Just rub a little Neosporin and bring it with you just in case you get a blister or anything like that. That needs to be tended to medically as well, because you don't want to end up with a foot infection when you're traveling. So just these little preventative things that might just help to prevent a disaster, right?
Yeah. You mentioned the more susceptible to a foot infection when we spoke about doing this episode. And I looked down at my foot after our conversation and noticed I had a blister, and it was like, I was like, is this getting infected? So I ran out after that conversation. I got Neosporin. That's how I found out. And that's when I asked about all these prices for medications. But it was just so funny that we talked about it, and I was like, oh my goodness, I can get a foot infection. So I ran out and got it.
Another big infection you can get susceptible to is food poisoning. Okay. If you're in a place that doesn't, I got real sick from a rarely cooked egg. It was like just a fried egg that they didn't cook enough. But when you have diabetes, and you're not able to eat because you're vomiting and you have to take insulin, that can be a situation where you need to go to the hospital. Okay. So a lot of doctors will send you on vacations to places that have dirty water, or, places that have more dysentery and things like that, with what we call antiemetics. They're drugs that help you stop vomiting, so that you can take your drip drop or your Gatorade, or you can hold food down and not just keep on vomiting. If you're in the case where you're vomiting and you can't stop, and you're on insulin, you do need to go to the emergency room. Yeah. So having those antiemetics and Pepto-Bismol or anything that could help you if you get a little bug in your stomach, those are nice things to bring with you. And the little electrolyte tablets would also be a nice thing to bring with you.
Yeah, I have had bouts of food poisoning and small sicknesses, and one thing I always needed was electrolytes, and so I've started packing those. It's been helpful, and
Definitely packing those.
I think I've noticed that I do get sick more since my diagnosis.
Interesting.
It
Oh,
is that, yeah, I do. And I don't know if that's like my long COVID thing or
yeah,
the
who
diabetes,
knows?
but I just feel like I'm more susceptible to infection
Well, I
and I
also
get sick
really,
more.
yeah, I also really think we were like living in a bubble, all of us, and now we're out in the world, so we're getting more
Hmm.
exposed to other people. It could be that you're traveling a lot, so bringing hand sanitizer with you. Try not to touch doorway handles. If you do, use your hand sanitizer. Just using a menu when you're out. There's more bacteria on the menu than there is on the toilet. So use your hand sanitizer after you use the menus. Like, so yeah, I mean, when you're traveling, you're exposed to a lot more people, airports, concerts, things where there's public restrooms. So absolutely, we'll get more. Anybody, whether they had diabetes or not, is going to be more susceptible because you're just around a lot more people.
Wow. You just you just made me appreciate the QR codes they put on tables now for menus because I miss menus and I always complain, but okay, maybe it's less
So
bacteria.
another good thing to do before a big trip that you've spent a lot of time and money on planning is get vaccinated. And I would say book that travel appointment about a month or two before your trip so that you can do all this planning. Yeah. But I have so many people that travel every single summer, and they're very successful with it. And I would say you have become a professional type one that travels, and you pull it off, man. You're enjoying your life. You're living this very full life, and you're not letting diabetes stop you.
Last time we spoke, you told me that vacation is not a time for perfection, it is a time for safety. Why is that?
Yeah. So running your blood sugars at a low target while you're traveling is too risky. Remember, I said most people require about 30% less insulin while they're traveling because they're so happy and they're active and they're drinking wine and they're really busy. And so your risk of lows is very high when you're traveling. So we want to run that target up just a little bit higher and just keep you safe. So getting rid of the perfection, I've got to be perfect with my diet, I've got to have perfect blood sugar control. Don't worry about that while you're traveling. Just keep yourself safe. Keep yourself at a little bit of a higher safe target. Review what your targets should be with your healthcare provider before you leave. But this is not a time for perfect diabetes control. It's a time to have fun and keep yourself safe.
Yeah, and I think because you're doing all of these new things, you're not in a routine. It's a time to give yourself grace. It's okay that you're not perfect ever, but more so when you're doing all these fun things, like enjoy them, be safe, run a
Yes.
little high sometimes,
Yeah.
keep yourself in check and monitor, but
Right.
also don't get stuck in that and don't be like, I need to be 85 all day, every day. Like, no, you can,
No.
you know, just have fun and be safe.
Yeah. Run your blood sugar in the mid to high 100s, if you need to. Talk to your doctor about it, but keep it at a safe level, and enjoy your vacation and prepare for things that could go wrong. Have extra supplies, have glucagon. But part of preparing is to re-establish different targets for different activities and things like that. And that's a really nice thing to talk about with your education team or your medical team before you leave.
Great. Well, Mary Rose, thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. I feel like what we should do sometime in the future is some sort of like live Q&A where people can ask all their questions because I have definitely missed something here. I'm sure there's so many areas of vacation that
Yes.
we could probably go on and on and on. So yeah, maybe that's something cool we could do in the future and bring people in and have them ask their questions. So Thank you for all that you've done with getting me prepared for this.
Yeah, this is fun. It's great. It's always so nice talking to you. And I'm glad that you can share all your expertise with the type 1 community. So it's great to watch you. Thanks for all you're doing.
Okay, a few things that we forgot to mention. Mary Rose says that even if you're using an insulin pump, you should still bring backup insulin pens and syringes, because if you have a pump malfunction, you'll need them. Also, when it comes to supplies, bring double. So when it comes to pumps and CGMs, I bring double what I think I'll need, because pumps fall off, CGMs will rip off when you're swimming or will malfunction, whatever. Bring extra, you'll need it. And of course, there's that link in the show notes. It's got resources from the letter to a doctor, a checklist of everything you should bring, and all of my go-to accessories that I've been using on my travels. Thank you for listening to this episode. New episodes release every Monday on podcast platforms and on YouTube in video form. I'm Justin, and I'll see you next week.